In this exercise, I'm going to introduce you to donuts, which are special varieties of compound paths inside of Illustrator. I'm still working inside the document called primitives.ai. A donut is any shape in which one path cuts a hole in another path. So one small path cuts a hole in a larger path. And that would be what I'm looking for where these two paths here are concerned. I want to go ahead and create a ring effect, essentially, where this inner path is not filled with white, but rather filled with transparency, cutting a hole in that sort of pale orange path in back of it, that salmon-colored path there. Go ahead and click on one, shift-click on the other to select them both with the black arrow tool. And then I'll have you go up to your shape mode, and instead of clicking on the minus front option, I want you to alt-click or option-click on it, so that we're creating a compound shape. And just to confirm that we have a compound shape, let's go ahead and twirl open my pathfinders. And you know what? This guy is someplace mired in this huge list of paths. Why don't we go ahead and bring him to the top of the list here by pressing Control-Shift right bracket or Command-Shift right bracket on the Mac. There's nothing that needs to be in front of it, so that works out perfectly fine. There it is. There's our compound shape, which includes, of course, one big path in back and a smaller path in front of it. That's cutting a hole. Now, we could, of course, change the behavior, the relationship between these two paths if we wanted to, by clicking on the forward path. When you're trying to change a relationship inside of a compound shape, you want to go ahead and click on one of the forward paths, as we've done here. So I'm meatballing it so that it and only it is selected here inside the illustration window. Then I'm going to drag it to a different location so that you can see that it is cutting a hole. It's creating a crescent at this point. Now, we could go ahead and Alt-click or Option-click. Very important. If you're going to change shape modes here inside of Illustrator CS4, you have to press the Alt or Option key when clicking on one of these top four icons. So if I Alt-click or Option-click on Unite, I'll create this sort of splitting cell effect right there. If I Alt or Option-click on Intersect, then I will just keep the area in which these two paths intersect each other. So anywhere they don't intersect will be transparent, as we're seeing right there. And then if I Alt or Option-click on Exclude, then I will get the exact opposite effect of intersect. The area where the paths intersect will turn transparent, and the areas where the paths do not will become opaque, as we're seeing there. All right, I'm going to leave that the way that we're seeing it for just a moment so that we can compare that to the behavior of a compound path. So I'm going to go ahead and click and shift-click on these two circles right there. We want another donut out of these guys. I can't bring this one to front, so we're going to actually have to find it in the list. So I'm going to go ahead and drag down the list. I'm looking for a couple of blue squares to indicate that these guys are the selected paths. All right, great. Then, as opposed to Alt or Option clicking, I'm going to click on minus front. And I get a compound path, can't twirl it open. We've seen this guy before, but let me show you now how a compound path behaves. If I go to my white arrow tool, which I'll need in order to select the inner shape, click off the paths, then Alt or Option click on the innermost path in order to select the entire thing independently of the outer path, and drag it to a different location, notice that I always get that exclusion behavior right there. So it's as if I applied the exclude mode. And that's because one path was completely surrounded by another when I applied the minus front mode. Now, you might think, well, gosh, you must be able to change the behavior by Alt or Option clicking on one of these guys. So if I were to Alt click, for example, on Unite, or Option click on the Unite icon on the Mac, I will create nothing. Actually, nothing happened that time. Sometimes what you get instead is you will see that the compound path is now inside of a compound shape, but in our case, nothing happened whatsoever. So go ahead and undo that modification because it's just a silly modification. Nothing occurred at this point. So that's Control-Z, Command-Z on the Mac. And I'll actually press Control or Command-Z again in order to move the path back to its original location. Let's go ahead and grab this guy too and put him where he belongs. I should get a snap right there where I'm snapping one center point onto the other because I'm dragging the path by its center point because it was created as a circle in the first place. That's why it has a default center point. What about these guys? We have rings for the hands too. I just want to show you different ways to create compound paths inside of Illustrator. And I'll tell you something, compound paths do have an advantage over compound shapes. I was telling you compound shapes, very versatile. You keep all of your original path outlines intact. You can change their behavior by alt-clicking on one of these shape mode icons and so on. The advantage, however, to working with a more simple compound path is that compound paths are fully compatible with PostScript. So you're not going to have any problem with printing errors and that kind of thing. It's rare that you're going to have problems with compound shapes, quite frankly, but that is the advantage of compound paths. They're old school. I'm going to go ahead and switch back to my black arrow tool by pressing the V key. Click on one of the paths, shift click on the other, And now I can go up to the object menu. This will accomplish the exact same donut effect, and choose compound path and then choose make, like so. And that will make a compound path. And again, same behavior as before. So if I go ahead and switch to my white arrow tool, I alt-click or option-click on the innermost path, drag it to a different location, we get an exclusion effect. You always get an exclusion effect out of compound paths. Now, you only get the subtract effect. It's still an exclusion effect. The reason it looks like a subtract effect is because one path is completely enclosed by the other. So that's why the excluded area falls entirely inside of the larger path. And you get, of course, the donut. All right, I'm going to go over to this other path right here inside of the right hand, his left, I suppose. And I'll press the V key to get the black arrow tool, click on one path, shift click on the other. And here's one more way to work. In case you like keyboard shortcuts, it's Control 8 or Command 8 on the Mac in order to create a compound path where one path cuts a hole in the other. Now, you may wonder, how do you remember 8? Well, this is how you remember 8. Check this out. I'm going to go ahead and drag this guy over here, press the Alt key or the Option key on a Mac in order to clone it. And then I'll drag this guy down like so and press Alt or Option again in order to clone it. Then I'll select these two paths, and I'll go over to the Unite icon and click on it, and we've got an 8. An 8 is a classic compound path because it has two holes cut inside of it. So it's actually one donut sitting on top of another. All right, so that's how you remember that keyboard shortcut. Control 8 goes ahead and creates a compound path. Control Shift Alt 8 or Command Shift Option 8 on the Mac goes ahead and busts up the compound path and releases it into, in this case, 3 separate path outlines. In the next exercise, I will show you how to use the divide operation here inside of Illustrator.